What do you want me to do for you? It's quite a pointed question. I think if I was started asking people at work or my children that question, it would sound like maybe I'd become a complete and utter grump. But it's a question Jesus asks twice in this chapter in Mark. First, he asks it of the disciples. That was in the passage that Rob preached on last week. And now he asks the blind beggar, Bartimaeus, the same question. It's a question worth reflecting on. What do we want Jesus to do for us? What's brought you here this morning? Is it a chance to see friends? Do you like biscuits? Maybe, just maybe, this sounds a bit old-fashioned, but maybe you'd like to know God a little better. I'm not sure what stage of your sort of faith journey you're on. Maybe you've been dyed-in-the-wool Christian throughout your entire life. Maybe your faith comes and goes. Maybe you come and it all seems utterly foreign to you and you're waiting for lightning to strike. What do you want Jesus to do for you? For blind Bartimaeus, the answer's pretty straightforward. He'd like to be able to see again. And through his encounter with Jesus, he recovers his sight. The question we most often ask in relation to the sort of healing miracles is, did they actually happen? But maybe the more pertinent question might be, what do they actually mean? Throughout Mark's Gospel, there's a theme of spiritual blindness. All these characters encountering Jesus who fail to see or understand what's there in front of them. Bartimaeus is able to cast off the chains of his earlier life, and the cell he's been living in is flooded with God's light. I don't feel I see the world terribly clearly. I've got all sorts of blind spots. I see the world through various filters, my prejudices, my pride, my anger. What do I want Jesus to do for me? I'd love to be able to see past all of these things. Maybe see the world as God actually sees it. Our other reading today is also about seeing from the book of Job. At the culmination of Job's story, he encounters God and he says, "I'd heard of you, but now my eye sees you." Job's is a story we often turn to when we're struggling and when we're in pain. Everything goes wrong for Job. He loses his children. He loses his wealth. Gets a terrible skin condition. His friends all turn up to try and comfort him. But as so often happens, they all manage to say the wrong thing. They think maybe there's an explanation for his suffering. Maybe he's sinned. There must be some reason for why he is suffering. And Job, bless him, is absolutely indignant. He's going to go and have his audience with God and get to the bottom of what on earth is going on. But once he's actually in front of God, he's just awed. The question that drives Job's whole story is there a God that is utterly beyond our own comprehension? A God that is beyond our earthly life and our earthly struggles? And Job is thirsting for that kind of revelation. One thing you really notice about Job is that throughout the book, he keeps talking to God. All of his friends talk about God. And talking about God isn't easy. The reality is, more often than not, words fail us when we're trying to press these things to make some sort of sense. I mean, each week you've got a team here who gets up trying to explain what's ultimately beyond our grasp. Our views are always partial, they're always limited. And Job's friends think that they can sort of use language to explain everything. That language itself can sort of serve as some sort of barrier against all the chaos around us. And Job comes to realize this. He says, "Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. My ears had heard of you. Surely that's never going to be enough. Now my eye sees you." Language has failed. All Job can do is see. It's not easy when you're wrestling with these sort of really big life questions. My son, Theodore, he's 5, and he started asking some of these quite challenging questions. It's natural. We've got a very close relative who is very sick, so he's been asking me questions like, are we with Jesus when we die? Is God everywhere? The young philosopher's over in the play area just right now. But so I took him on my knee. I said, "Son, read the book of Job." I didn't really. I thought, recommending 42 chapters of quite dense Hebrew poetry on the meaning of everything to a 5-year-old might be seen as a bit of a parental fail. It's strange, really. Job never appears in sort of kids' Bibles. I don't know why that is. But I think when you get confronted with these questions, you sort of really do feel the weight of your parenting responsibilities. It'd be very easy to give him kind of glib, easy answers that might serve as a bit of a sticking plaster, but they'll only last so long until it actually comes up against life's experiences. So how was I to answer his questions? I think if we were to look for an example of how not to deal with them, we could maybe look to the life of painter Edvard Munch. Does everyone recognise this painting? And there's not so many paintings that are so famous they've got their own emoji. There we go. It's one of the most famous paintings in the world. And a lot of people think that it sums up how we feel in modern life. It's sort of got this great sense of gnawing anxiety. Apparently it was inspired by a sunset stroll where Edvard had this terrible revelation. He said, "I stood there trembling with anxiety. I sensed an infinite scream passing through nature." Poor Edvard, like Job, didn't really have an easy life. He was born in 1863 into a very, very religious family. His grandfather had actually been one of the most successful priests in Norway. And Edvard would go on to say of his own father, Christian, he was temperamentally nervous and obsessively religious to the point of psychoneurosis. From him, I inherited the seed of madness. The angels of fear, sorrow, and death stood by my side since the day I was born. They stood by my bedside when I shut my eyes, threatening me with death, hell, and eternal damnation. I don't know about you, but that sounds like religion gone very, very bad. Edvard's mother would die of TB in 1868 when he was about 5, and his father was convinced she'd passed away because they hadn't prayed enough. He had the same limited understanding of God that we see in Job's friends. When Edvard's sister, his favourite sister no less, died of TB also in 1877, Edvard gave up. He lost his faith. He felt God had let him down. And just in the face of all that suffering, he couldn't believe in the God that his father had tried to impose on him. I think one of the amazing things about art is it takes us kind of beyond language. It's somehow able to express things that we can't quite press into words. It's like music in that regard. And Edvard Munch would say of his own work, "I did not paint what I see, but what I saw." He was trying to capture that sort of churning chaos within him. The scream itself is a sort of breaking point with this kind of notion of a vengeful and mean-spirited God. Munch would say himself that it was an icon for a godless age. I've got to say, I actually sympathise a little bit with Edvard Munch. He was wrestling with exactly the same questions that we're all struggling with, that Theo's even wrestling with. Like Job, he was thirsting after a God that was beyond his rational understanding. So, if I was going to answer Theo's questions, I better do a better job than Edward Monk's dad. So what did I say to him, faced with all these profound life questions? I kind of stumbled, if I'm honest. Language failed me. I think the best I could manage was a quick, yes, that is what we hope for, Theo. Words sometimes just really aren't enough, are they? So if I was better on my feet, what should I have said to him? What am I saying to everyone here this morning? Maybe I'd tell him to throw himself with great abandon into the full mystery of God. Be humbled in the face of it. Would it be okay to tell him to dedicate his life to trying to see God? I think that'd be okay. I think we all get a little bit uncomfortable when people start talking about mystical experiences. But Jesus himself said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." And Jesus, he was a pretty hard-headed realist. For Bartimaeus, asking to see, he's actually thirsting after true spiritual insight. He wants to see beyond the surface of things. He wants to see beyond the surface of ourselves. He wants to see beyond the surface of our lives, our world. He wants to see God at work around him. And this isn't necessarily a safe route. We have to wrestle with difficult things. Forgiveness, sacrifice, love. Seeing the world in this way will challenge you, and it will change you. It's a lifelong journey, learning to see God. So how do we make the first step on that journey? I actually think it involves recognizing, like Job does, the limits of our own understandings, trying to see those blind spots. We're also bound up in our own views on things, whether it's politics or religion, whatever. Job's example shows the faith that goes beyond small-minded religion. It's no longer about an idea of trying to impose a notion of God, trying to control people, trying to offer up something that they say is the ultimate truth. Job's revelation makes him appreciate a faith that looks outwards. It's a faith that's about seeking further truth. So as you go out this week, remember Job's words, "I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know." Maybe it's time we kind of gave up trying to latch on and control those things that we think we understand, and maybe actually just look on with some sense of awe and wonder at all those things that are really utterly beyond our comprehension.